In this video, we'll go over the 10 best cards that can be cheated out of the extra deck with cards like Waking the Dragon. Basically, really good extra deck monsters who aren't required to be summoned in their intended way in order to use their effects. And at number 10, we have the Blueeyes Ultimate Dragon. This is a 4500 attack beat stick non-effect monster who is one of the strongest cards you can bring out in pure stats, which isn't restricted by its summoning mechanics, as it has no other effect which prevents it from only being fusion summoned, like something like the 5-headed dragon does. And back in the days when people were using Cyberstein to OTK their opponents, they were using Cyberstein's effect to cheat out Blueeyes Ultimate Dragon, equip him with Megamorph, and then attack for 9,000 points of damage. Of course, that's not very useful nowadays. The best way to use Ultimate Dragon in the current meta is in a Tenyi deck that also runs Waking the Dragon, as it's the strongest non-effect monster you can bring out from your extra deck. So surprisingly, the card which was the original best card to cheat out of the extra deck is still a pretty good card to cheat out of the extra deck today. And at number 9, we have Cyber Dragon Infinity. This card has the effect where you can detach an Exceeds material to negate one effect and destroy that card, which is a really powerful effect. The only problem though is that if you cheat this card out of the extra deck, it's not going to have any Exceeds material. Luckily, it has another good effect where once per turn you can attach one face-up attack position monster on the field to this card as an Exceeds material. So you get to get rid of one of your opponent's monsters in order to give this card one negate. And while this card is really good, it kind of has a low spot on this list, because usually the cards you want to bring out of the extra deck with a Waking the Dragon need to be good during your opponent's turn or at other inconvenient times in which the card might trigger. And so if Cyber Dragon Infinity is cheated out of the extra deck during your opponent's turn, then it's not going to have any time to use either of its effects, and will just be a 2100 attack beat stick. But if you can get it out during your turn, it's amazing. And that's why it still makes the list, just not at a very high spot. And at number 8, we have Thousand Eyes Restrict. This card has the effect where once per turn, you can attach one monster your opponent controls to this card as an equip card, and then it will gain attack and defense equal to that monster's. It also has another passive effect where every other card on the field cannot change their battle positions or attack. So if this card is brought out during your opponent's turn, it is a complete lockdown on your opponent from attacking you for that turn, which already gives it some protection that Cyber Dragon Infinity doesn't have, so that it can use its absorption effect during your next turn. And it also doubles as a really good instant fusion target. So if you're playing instant fusion alongside Waking the Dragon, you can use instant fusion on Thousand Eyes Restrict to steal one of your opponent's monsters and then use it as a link material. And it's this versatility that allows this card to make the list. And at number 7, we have Blackwing Full Armor Master. This is a level 10 Synchro monster with 3000 attack and defense, who is unaffected by other card effects, which is the best kind of protection a card can have, as the only way to get rid of this card is to beat over it by battle. And with both its attack and defense being 3000, that's kind of difficult. And not only that, it has a passive effect on the field that allows it to place counters on your opponent's monsters, who activate monster effects, which you can then use to take control of those monsters during your turn, or destroy them during the end phase, which gives this card even more value to be brought out during your opponent's turn. And at number 6, we have Infinitrack Fortress Megaclops. This rank 3 monster is a 4000 attack beat stick, which is unaffected by other monster effects, except by those of Exceeds monsters. And since the most common type of extra deck monster people play nowadays is link monsters, there is a very good chance that this card will just straight up be immune to your opponent's monster effects. So they'd have to get rid of it with either a spell or trap card, or beat it over in battle. And since it has 4000 attack, that is an incredibly difficult thing to accomplish. Oh, and I might have forgot to mention, it can't be destroyed by battle unless it's by an Exceeds monster. So unless your opponent is running something like Utopia the Lightning, this guy is not going anywhere if they're not playing any spell or trap card removal. It also has some extra effects that only really apply if you play Exceeds monsters, as it allows you to special summon one from your graveyard and attach one of your opponent's cards to it as an Exceeds material, which is a really good effect, but that's not why this card is on this list. It's mainly here for being a gigantic beat stick that's hard to get rid of. And at number 5, we have Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. This is a level 8 Synchro monster that is normally kind of difficult to Synchro summon because it requires a Synchro monster as one of its materials. And that's because it has a really good negate, where once per turn you can negate one monster effect and destroy it. And then this card will gain attack equal to that destroyed monster's attack until the end of the turn. Now really, there's a few things you want on a monster that can be brought out through Waking the Dragon. One of them is some kind of negate or lockdown, to stop your opponent from doing things during their turn. And another is to give your monster some kind of survivability, so that it can stop your opponent from attacking or be a great benefit during your next turn. And this card can both negate one monster effect, which is good against pretty much every deck, and then gain a lot of attack points, which will allow it to survive until your next turn, unless your opponent is able to beat over it with something else they managed to bring out after the negate. And even then, it has extra battle protection if it battles a level 5 or higher monster. Granted, if you just attack into this thing with an Exceeds or Link monster, monsters which do not have levels, then that's not really an issue, especially with how common Link monsters are to attack with. But it does mean your opponent can't even try attacking this with high-level main deck monsters, fusions, or other synchros, as it has a built-in Honest-like effect. So a really good card to cheat out with Waking the Dragon, but I'm not super confident that it's better than the next card on this list, so I'd really put the number 4 and 5 spots in more of a situational thing, where you can choose either or depending on what deck you're going against. Because at number 4, we have Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss. This is a level 9 Synchro monster who has a difficult summoning requirement, as it requires a non-dark dragon Synchro monster as one of its materials, which doesn't matter if you cheat it out of the extra deck, especially since it doesn't require it to be Synchro summoned in order to use its effects. Basically, what its effect is once per turn during either player's turn, you can negate the effect of one face-up card your opponent controls. And the great thing about this negate is that it works on any card and not just monster effects, like Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon does. So you can use this effect to negate a spell or trap effect. Granted, assuming that spell or trap effect is not spell speed 3 or 4, as you can only respond to other spell speed 2 or 1 effects. So if you're not well versed in spell speeds, you can't use this card to negate counter trap cards or super polymerization, but it works on basically anything else. And it also has 3200 attack, which is actually just good enough to make it a difficult attack target for your opponent to beat over. As at 3000 attack, most decks can meet that amount pretty easily, but getting over 3000 attack requires going into a monster specifically put in the extra deck to beat over big monsters. So your opponent would have to go into extra resources just to attack over this thing, if they wanted to get rid of its negate effect. And in fact, this is a very popular card for guard dragons to cheat out of the extra deck, because that negate is just very good and versatile, aka good against a wide variety of decks. And at number 3, we have Last Warrior from Another Planet. Now, this is a very popular card to bring out with Waking the Dragon, as what this card does is completely lock out your opponent from summoning monsters, as while this card is out, neither player can normal, flip, or special summon any monsters. So basically, the only thing you can do is set monsters face down from your hand. So if this card is brought out during your opponent's turn, they have to be able to attack over this thing with the current monsters they already have out, if they want to continue their combo plays, or get rid of it with a card effect. So this card has some very good lockdown potential, and it's going to force your opponent to use a lot of resources in order to get rid of it, unless they just happen to have a monster on their side of the field with more than 2400 attack. Now, if this card didn't also prevent you from summoning monsters, or if it just had a little bit higher stats, it would probably be the number 1 on this list. But since it doesn't have either of those things, it's still a really strong choice, it's just not the best one. And at number 2, we have Naturia Exterior. While this card is on the field, you can negate the effects of as many spell or trap cards per turn as you want. So, if you're playing against a deck that's very spell or trap card heavy, like Sky Strikers or Altergeist, this card can nearly completely shut them down, unless they're able to use a monster effect to get rid of this card. It's kind of like the opposite of Infinitrack Fortress Megaclops, where it's really hard to get rid of with spell and traps, but pretty easy to get rid of with monster effects. So it's not at all versatile, as most decks are monster effect heavy, so this card isn't very good against most of those decks. But against the few decks that are very reliant on spell or trap cards, This card is probably the best card to play against those decks, to the point where sometimes they'll just quit the game and try to side in cards that can out it next time. And since for some reason this hard to bring out fusion monster that requires 2 Synchro monsters as its materials does not have a clause where it needs to be fusion summoned, that makes it one of the best cards to cheat out of the extra deck, if you can cheat it out. And at number 1, we have Raidraptor Ultimate Falcon. Now, while Naturia Exterio and some of the other negate cards are obviously really good to bring out against certain decks, Ultimate Falcon is like the universal card to bring out with cards that can cheat it out of the extra deck, because it's just a pain for any deck to try to get rid of. This card has 3500 attack and is unaffected by all card effects, in the same vein as Blackwing Full Armor Master. Except since this card has 500 more attack, it's incredibly more difficult to beat over by battle, to the point where just bringing out Ultimate Falcon can sometimes win you the duel, because your opponent just literally cannot get rid of the card. And then it can just slowly attack over everything your opponent controls, since it's unaffected by all the card effects, and there's nothing they can really do about it. And that's why Ultimate Falcon is the most played card in extra decks that also run Waking the Dragon. Because while some of the other cards may be better against certain matchups, Ultimate Falcon is good against everything, so it's much more versatile if you don't want to have to run too many cards in your extra deck just for Waking the Dragon, and you can't really go wrong with an Ultimate Falcon against pretty much any deck you might face against, which is why it easily takes the number 1 spot on this list. Alright, and that's the end of the video. If you think I missed any other cards that should have made this list, or have ideas for future videos just like this one, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments. And also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for weekly videos just like this one.